practicing forgiveness is such an important thing, not only just for other people, but for ourselves as well. What is your motivator? Like, are you motivated by pain or pleasure? And there's also studies as well that show, like, plants, for instance, they've had like a room full of plants and they'll play classical, like, light music, like frequency has so much power, and the plants were like thriving. And then they did another one where like they're playing screamo music, like heavy metal, and the plants were starting to like die.
Welcome to the Minds Unleashed show with your host, Eric. Join him on the journey where we explore transformative ideas, confront challenges, and discover new perspectives. Together, let's elevate the mindset and transform your personal and business success. So whether you're seeking motivation, practical advice, or a fresh perspective, you've come to the right place. Join Eric on the Minds Unleashed show, and let's dive in together to empower your mind and unleash freedom.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Minds Unleashed show. I'm your host, Eric. Please join me on this pursuit to see what it takes to empower your mind and unleash freedom. As always, if you get value out of this, please share this podcast with a friend. And don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. I truly appreciate it. Let's get into today's show. I'm so grateful to introduce you to today's guest, Lorina Owen. Lorina is a mindset and manifestation coach for ambitious women. She helps you break through your mental barriers and unlock freedom in your career and personal life so that you can fully thrive and experience wealth in all areas of your life without the burnout. Welcome to the show, Lorina.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here today. Let's kind of dive right into it. So as I was doing research and kind of figuring out a great place to kind of start us off, I was actually wondering, what was your childhood like? How was growing up? And how was your relationship with your parents?
Ooh, going right into it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty typical childhood for the most part. I grew up in Montreal, Canada, just to start. And then when I was 10, we moved to Ontario. So I grew up just outside Toronto mainly. Yeah, my childhood was like typical, kind of we used to spend a lot of time. We had a summer cottage, so spending a lot of time outdoors, which was really nice. I have two brothers. So yeah, I was the only girl, middle child. So I had a good balance of Barbies and Hot Wheels. And I always wanted a sister, so I used to dress my little brother up as a girl. I'm sure he'll never forgive me for that. And yeah, my relationship with my parents, I'm quite close with my mom. I was always very close with my mom. My parents separated when I was 5. So yeah, I didn't have the best relationship with my dad for a few years, but we've definitely rekindled that now. So right now the relationship I have with both my parents is really good.
That's great to hear. What did it look like for you to kind of rekindle that relationship with your dad?
That just involved, I think, like during my teenage years, definitely there was just like a lot of distance, and kind of as I went into my 20s, we sort of like, I worked on a little bit of forgiveness around him not being present really around that. And then, yeah, over time, just realizing that I still wanted to have a relationship with him. So through that, we were able to rekindle our relationship.
What did that forgiveness kind of look like for him not being present? Because, I think there is maybe some women that might, struggle with their relationship with their fathers, maybe because they aren't present, or there's so many stressors that do affect them.
Yeah. How did that look? I'm trying to think of because it was kind of over a long period of time. Like our relationship wasn't just repaired overnight. It was quite a few years of sort of speaking again, still quite a bit of distance. And then over time, I think through my own, just like working on myself and my own personal development journey, practicing forgiveness is such an important thing. And it's not only just for other people, it's for ourselves as well. And, I've known people who have lost their parents, and, my dad was still around. And I thought, well, he definitely like felt bad for what he had done, like, not being so present. And yeah, I think he wanted to be around. Like I saw he was making an effort and he was trying to be in my life. So I felt like, I can at least give him that forgiveness and like try to repair that relationship more. So yeah, like I said, we're not super close now, but we do talk quite often. He lives in Montreal still. So I feel lucky to still have that. And just to go kind of into context, we're saying, yeah, some women have maybe not the best relationship with their father. I think like when it comes to dating, just to sidetrack a bit, like I've definitely noticed that showing up in like my dating life before, like attracting kind of like emotionally unavailable men. And I sort of had this moment last year where I was really seeing this pattern and how it was reflected from the childhood pattern. So I actually did like a healing around a father wound, which was really, really powerful. So that was just kind of like for myself, spoke to my dad about a lot of stuff around, you know, him not being around when I was a kid, things I didn't understand, feeling abandoned. And like that was so healing, very difficult to bring up, but really, really healing. And I really recommend anyone who has the opportunity to do that, if that's something you're open to, like it can be so powerful.
What would that healing kind of look like? Like, how would you kind of start somebody off? If they're maybe like they're stuck, they're like, I want to have a relationship with a parent, whether it's mom or dad, but like, how do they even kind of get the ball rolling?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different places you can start. It would be very dependent on the situation of each person. But I would say like definitely doing some journaling around that to start, doing some shadow work as well, like inner child shadow work, like really getting to the root cause of like what are the feelings that are coming up? Like what is the relationship you want to have? Where did the relationship maybe go wrong? And just having very open communication and not having super high expectations in the beginning, because I think when people are depending on the what that relationship dynamic looks like, but I think, you know, it can be so different. But if someone goes in with these high expectations, they can be disappointed. But I think just like looking at it as coming from like a very what's the word, like a objective standpoint, like just non-objective, that's the word we're probably looking for, but just yeah, just looking at it as like, hey, like let's see how we can repair this, keeping a very open mind. But yeah, I think just starting with yourself and with the parent as well, and like practicing forgiveness as well, right, is really important. Because, you know, I think everyone for the most part does try to do their best, and what a parent did years ago when you were a child, or, you know, even more recently, like maybe at the time they thought it was the best, or like they were not in the best headspace, so it's like they're not that same person anymore, you know, and I'm sure they have a lot of guilt around certain things as well.
Yeah, I think that's a key point there, is that, parents definitely do try their best given the cards that they're dealt. And like, you're probably right, where they maybe, you're growing up, you're in your 20s, and maybe they do feel some of that shame and guilt. So you did mention like not having high expectations, which I think is super critical, because when you're going maybe through that forgiveness or that journaling of what your thoughts look like, you might be like, oh, I really wanted my parent to do X, Y, and Z for me, and I think it would help me out. But if you kind of bring yourself back to a ground level of like, I wanted them to do that, but because they didn't, I became a different person because of that.
Yeah, yeah. It's I mean, it's difficult. I think this is why the inner child like healing is so important, because we can all wish for something different, right? But like it's kind of like we got to make do with what the cards were dealt with. Otherwise, you can really fall into that victim mentality. So it's about accepting what is. It doesn't mean you have to like it, but it's about accepting it, being able to like forgive it and move on. And like you can do different things like reparenting yourself, where that would be like you can do certain hypnosis things or like inner child work around that. You know, seeking a therapy, working with a coach. Like there's so many different ways you can approach that. But yeah, just not having like, because even though you might want to repair a relationship with a parent, sometimes it might not be repairable, right? Or the other person, maybe they're not the person you're hoping they're going to be, and like that's still difficult. So it's like, can you accept them as they are and have that relationship in some way? Or like, you know, there's so much that goes into it, and like I said, every person's situation is going to be completely different. But I think just really honoring that, like practicing forgiveness is really important, and really doing some deep journaling and shadow work and like reflection around that.
You mentioned like this inner child work phrase a lot. What does that mean?
Yeah, so inner child healing is so if you really think like essentially we're all a bunch of adults running around with our like inner child running the show in a sense, right? You know, so if you, for instance, if you get like easily triggered by something, or you know, there's like hurt still coming from the past, a lot of this will have to do from in our childhood. And this control, like this is where our subconscious mind is programmed, usually from the age of like 0 to 7 years old. So if we haven't dealt with these limiting beliefs or struggles, for instance, if you have a belief that like I'm not lovable, this could come from a parent maybe not being present at the time, or a fear of abandonment, right? A parent not being around. Um, or, I'm not worthy of XYZ because of something so small. So if that is still running, then that could show up in, for instance, in dating and relationships, right? And like you could be triggered, and that can show up in so many different ways. So if you haven't done that inner child work and like looked at those parts of yourself, so we call it the shadow, looking at those shadow parts of yourself to understand where that comes from and to like work to move through that belief or work through that trigger, and integrate that, then that's what kind of inner child work is kind of the basis of. So it's really just looking at like getting curious, what was my childhood like? How is this holding me back? And kind of, you can, like I said, you can reparent yourself around that. So you can almost be like, well, what would I have wanted to happen? And like sort of try to like imagine that instead.
Okay. What you mentioned, like reparenting yourself, like what does that even, like what does that look like?
So that's, I mean, like there's so many different ways you can look at it. So it's like looking at like, well, what are your needs? What do you need now, right? Like what needs were not met in childhood that you need met. So like, for instance, if you feel abandoned, like I'll use a relationship example again, because relationships are such a great mirror for like where we still need to grow, right? Like if, for instance, you have like a fear of abandonment, that could be because maybe you felt abandoned as a child, and that can really show up in like an anxious attachment style in relationship. Or it could go swing the other way where you become very avoidant, right? But you want to get to a secure place, for instance. So it's like, okay, well, what part do I need to like tend to those needs? What am I needing that I can give myself? So it's like self sourcing. So it's almost like reparenting in a sense, like honoring what is that inner child portion of myself asking for.
Yeah, I see a lot of these patterns like show up in my own life, my own relationships. Like, as I've gotten to be in my 20s, I see myself being like hyper independent, and I don't want like somebody else like doing something for me or helping me out in any way. I don't like that. And so like it definitely took a lot of like reflection of like, oh, why do I do that, or why won't I let somebody help me? So it is a very interesting process for somebody at their teenage, their 20s. I feel like when people start to go through this, and it could be later on in life, but it's definitely an interesting reflection points to go through some of these different pieces of life and realize of like, oh, because of how I grew up, this is why I have that anxious attachment style.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. And like what you mentioned, that you said, like, regardless of what, or like age, it's like, yeah, there's no age where it's too late or too early to be doing this. I mean, I think everyone should start doing it as like soon as they can. But yeah, I, for instance, didn't really start looking at myself a lot more until like my later 20s, and going into like my early 30s even. So I think there's no time that's too late. It's like when you feel that nudge is there, I think, and like you're sort of realizing, hey, like I'm seeing patterns and I probably need to start looking at them. There's so much freedom on the other side of doing that type of self-development work on yourself.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you had this pattern where you were going after like emotionally unavailable men. What were those patterns in men that you like kind of saw?
Yeah, just that they were like always kind of fresh out of a relationship and just would act like they were wanting a relationship. They would act like we were in like an actual committed relationship, but then the minute that conversation would come up of like, what are we? It would be like, no, I don't want anything. So I'm like, well, it would be, and so it was like my boundaries as well. It's like, what am I accepting and what am I, being open to? Where I'm letting this constantly happen, but it was like the same similar type of guy, just in a different body, basically. But yeah, so they were emotionally unavailable, but always really nice. It was like very nice men, but emotionally unavailable, which was interesting.
How do like what's your opinion and thoughts on like I think men struggle to become emotionally available for women in relationships. Like what are your thoughts and opinions on how they would go about doing that?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm not a relationship expert myself. That's not the area that I specialize in, but yeah, I think like,
That's totally fine.
pardon?
I said that's totally fine.
No, but yeah, it's just in that sense, like I think, it's going to be, because like the same thing can happen with women, but it's just basically like you need to like look at your patterns, and is this something you want? Like for instance, I was having a conversation with a guy about this last night. He really wants, like, he wants to meet someone, he wants to have children, get married, settle down, but every time he's been trying to date someone, it's not working out, and he ends it because he's like, I'm not ready. So I'm like, you need to stop going trying to date. Look at yourself. Why are you not ready? There's obviously something there that you need to work through yourself. So that's going to be one. And it's like really embodying like a healthy masculine energy, because when it comes to like feminine and masculine energies, for instance, like it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, we all have those energies as like the yin and the yang. You can have like wounded feminine and masculine, and then you can have healthy feminine and masculine. So the wounded can be coming, like, for instance, a lot of women tend to be very heavy in their masculine, independent, not like, not being open, afraid to ask for help, really hustling, where the feminine is like being more like open to receive, they're open to receiving help from men, letting a man lead, where like a healthy masculine again would be like, wanting to be in a committed relationship with the right woman, like wanting to lead in that sense, versus like avoidant is going to be very like wounded masculine as well. So it's looking at like where's these patterns coming from and understanding why you have them. I think it's everyone's responsibility to do their own work on themselves.
Yeah. And it's definitely something I think people should realize is like it doesn't happen overnight. Like you mentioned, it takes like weeks,
Oh,
months,
could
and
take
like
years.
a lot of, yeah, it could even take
It
years. Yeah.
depends what it is. Yeah, definitely.
And that it's important that people can take that time to like also reflect. I think from my own like experiences, like having the space and time to reflect on those situations or kind of what happened is really where the turning points were for me, as well as also like journaling and writing down kind of how I felt and what I was thinking, instead of just going to certain friends and just like kind of word vomiting everything that was like top of mind for me.
Yeah. No, that's great that you've like been doing the work and journaling on yourself as well. And like it sounds like you found it to be really helpful for you and reflective.
Yeah. The next area I'd love to kind of get into is in your first podcast episode you did on that you had yourself. You kind of, it seemed like that the catalyst for your own wellness journey was going through bulimia and how it was a control issue for you for like unhappiness. And I wanted to know like what that healing journey was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a dark time in my life for sure. I think it was just a lot of things. Like I've had moments in my life where I've seen that what happens is when you don't look at the parts of you that are not going to feeling well, or like, if you're like suppressing all these emotions, or you haven't dealt with what's going on, eventually they're all going to come up, right? Like you're going to hit a point where they'll come up. And that's what had happened for me. I was like kind of always put up this front, like I'm a tough girl, like I've got this. And just from some stuff I had from growing up. And yeah, I really ignored a lot of that until I just got to a point where I was just so unhappy with the life that I was living, that I think I just hit this rock bottom. And it was like, yeah, bulimia is a form of control. And I just felt like that was the one thing I could control. And what had happened as well as I used to smoke. So I had quit smoking at that time. And when you quit smoking as well, sometimes you can put on a lot of weight because you're eating a lot of food as like a means for the habit. So I hadn't noticed. And yeah, I put on a lot of weight really quickly. And I think just that was like the set off with all the other things that were going on. So yeah, that was a few years of like a journey going through that. And I had gone to try to talk to someone in therapy, but honestly, it was not helping me at all. I think it was around like CBT therapy. Wasn't helping me at all. I decided to like try to do it myself, and I did. I actually like managed to completely heal myself on my own. But the main thing that was like so, I guess, game changing for me was I found these two women who were just incredibly inspiring and empowering. They were like the epitome of like healthy, in shape, but looking good, eating healthy food. So that was when I really saw like, oh, you can eat well and work out and still look good. And like, you don't need to have these restrictions so much, because I hadn't really known too much about that before. And that just really like inspired me. And I saw what they were doing. And that actually was like at that time I wanted to do, I was doing my personal training certification, and I really wanted to start working with women who had low self-worth, body image, and like eating disorders, and help them through that, because I'd done that. But unfortunately I wasn't ready then. I still had a lot of work on myself to do, and ended up kind of falling into the corporate world around that move to Toronto. But that was the catalyst of like that health journey really taking off. And I just saw how powerful it was when you started working on your mindset, working on yourself, and like how you can heal yourself, and the power that we all have within us when we're determined to do it. So that dream kind of never left. And I'm so glad that I've been able to pick up that path again now.
Yeah, it's really good that you were able to kind of get through those stages. I do remember a couple like documentaries on people that did go through some of those like bulimic like kind of challenges in their life, and it looks super like damaging to themselves and like how it made them feel. And I'm really glad that you're able to kind of get that resolved. And you mentioned how like therapy wasn't helpful for you. Why would you say that was?
Do you know what? I'm not going to say anything bad about therapy because I know it can be really helpful for a lot of people. I just found myself personally, I have never found therapy to be great for me. Talking therapy never did anything for me. I was like, I'm just talking about the problem, just talking about it. What has been incredible for me has been coaching, to be honest. Like, because you get such quick, like, you can have such incredible quick fixes, like fast and changes. And I've just noticed like the shifts I've had have been so powerful through coaching, where just constantly talking and talking and talking about something, yeah, it can definitely be helpful, but like there's not these shifts happening when coaching, working with like certain coaches, I've just had these incredible like game changing moments, and it's just been like, yeah, exactly. Game changer is like the word to use.
What was like different for the coach experiences versus like the therapy experiences for you?
So like I said, the therapy was just kind of like talking quite a lot. It felt like I was just going around in circles, where coaching, just it was like a transformational coach I had worked with, one of the first ones. It was all around mindset, and she utilized like it was sort of like, you can almost consider it like the Myers-Briggs. Maybe some of the listeners have heard of like gene keys before in human design, but it really just shows you how you operate. And it just answered so many questions I had about myself. And I really understood how to powerfully start working with my mindset around limiting beliefs and, doing emotional healing, because we hold so much in the body, where if you're just constantly talking about it, yeah, it can be helpful, but we store all these emotions in the body, especially as women, right? Women, there's like studies out there that women suffer so much higher with like autoimmune disorders and things, because we're taught to people please and not say no, and we don't have good boundaries and be nice, play small, right? So that builds up, and that gets stored in the body. So if we're not dealing with that, it creates dis-ease in the body, right? So this is why people are like so on edge and anxiety and all these different things, when you can learn how to do emotional regulation, working with your nervous system through things like breath work and EFT tapping and rewiring your subconscious mind. That is so powerful when you can like do things like hypnosis, or I do a powerful technique with NLP called single belief change. We can change someone's belief in 30 minutes. It's incredible what I've seen like some of the clients come out with. It takes away like fear of judgment, fear of not feeling good enough. They start taking action in their business. Their beliefs about themselves change. Where if you're just talking about something, you're not maybe necessarily, you might have some understanding about how things are working, but until you actually like work to shift the belief and how you actually operate on your subconscious level, like that is where like the magic really happens.
You mentioned this single belief change. So like, can you give an example of like what, like an example of a limiting belief, and like what the first step somebody would take on kind of how to fix that?
Yeah, so a single belief change isn't something you can really do on your own. I don't, maybe some people can. I haven't tried it myself, but yeah, I mean, with a limiting belief. So with some of the clients I work with, for instance, they tend to be a lot of female entrepreneurs. A lot of beliefs that come up or limiting beliefs are, I'm not good enough, or fear of judgment, of being seen, or success is not available to me. Who am I to have this kind of thing? A lot around money mindset as well. So those are some big ones, but like we'll just start working. So there's a technique that is involved with it, and it's around working with different beliefs and kind of taking away sort of that emotional charge behind it. So it feels like that belief at the end is no longer theirs. Like it doesn't resonate with them. So that's a really powerful technique. But, a lot through powerful questioning, reframing. Hypnosis is great. There's like time techniques. There is like crowding out beliefs. There's so many different things you can do. Affirmations are incredible as well. As long as they're the right affirmations that are going to resonate with the client. As well as visualization is really powerful too. Like, you see athletes and people like Olympians who are visualizing their race, and they're visualizing winning, or, the game, whatever it is. But like the power of the mind is so incredible. So this works with manifestation as well, right? Where manifestation is highly based on neuroscience, is it's using your subconscious mind and visualization to visualize that outcome as well.
Gotcha. Okay. That's very interesting to kind of think about that, because I think some people have like limiting beliefs that they've probably been storing for years, maybe even decades. And so to like get that belief system almost like out of them and not, clogging their mind in a way, like that quick can be very powerful, it sounds like.
Oh, it's amazing. And you're so right. Like everyone has limiting beliefs. We all struggle with them. And sometimes like we'll have worked through one, but then another situation later on in life can pop up, and maybe there's that belief can pop up again, just in a different form, or beliefs we were never aware of might show up. And this has to do with awareness is the first step, right? If we don't bring awareness or start looking and getting curious at where this is coming from, like for instance, if there's someone who's like in a really fixed mindset and they're like, nope, nothing's wrong with me, I don't need to do any personal development, it is the way it is, they're complaining, they're stuck in victim mentality, that is going to be their reality all the time. But when you start saying like, why are things happening this way? What is my belief around that? Questioning it, bringing awareness to it, then you can start to shift it.
So like if I said that my like either limiting belief or opinion of myself is that like my self-confidence and body image is like it's 6 feet below the ground, right? And I'm being completely honest, like how would you kind of help me resolve that? Or like what would be some questions I could ask myself? Or
Yeah, well, first off, it would be like one of the first best questions to ask is like, is this belief true? And you'd say like, is it really, really true? Because most often it's not, right? Like 99% of the time, it's not going to be true. Um, and then you can also ask like, who would I be without this belief? Like if I didn't have this belief, how would I show up? But that's the big one, is who would I be without that belief?
I mean, I'd probably have a lot more confidence and I'd probably have a lot more self-esteem, I would probably say, because yeah, that's a great way to kind of reframe and like move the perspective to shift. Because I think like, I don't know how many, like the voice in my head is always like anytime you look in the mirror you're like, oh, you're not good enough, right? And so that stems from my relationship with my father, where nothing I ever did was ever good enough, right? And so that self-esteem is built up, and it's something I still struggle with today, and it's something I'm trying to push forward on. But thinking to myself like, what would it look like without that limiting belief? Oh, that might be something helpful that I've actually never heard before.
Definitely. Thank you for being vulnerable about that. That I know that's something like so many, like that's been one of my biggest beliefs as well, due to like a stepfather thing as well. So it's like, we all have these beliefs around not being good enough, or some other belief around that, but you can work to rewire that, right? So it's questioning like, you get to dictate your worth, no one else does. It's Our worth is like an innate thing, right? We're like innately worthy, and it comes from within. So it's not putting your value on external things. But yeah, like you get to decide how you want to show up and what you want to believe about yourself. And the most important thing as well is like, even if there's something, so for instance, say you really aren't happy with where your body's at right now, and like that's okay. It's like accepting, okay, I'm not happy with how I'm looking right now, but I know I can change it. And like, who's the main thing is like identity work. So before you can really start to make the change, you need to think of who's the version of me who has that awesome body, who feels really good about themselves, who's confident in themselves. What traits do they have? What beliefs do they have? What habits do they have? And how can you start being that person now before you become it? Because you need to become it first, and then you'll start, once you identify and you send those like patterns into your brain, and you start operating on this level of this identity, it's going to be a no-brainer for you. You're going to be like, of course I'm going to go to the gym, and of course I'm going to eat healthy because I'm that person. But if you still are identifying with someone maybe who is like eating unhealthy, or I'm not saying this is you, but I'm using this as an example, just saying if like someone who's like eating unhealthy, skipping workouts, watching Netflix, maybe, eating unhealthy foods, drinking too much, whatever. If that's how you're operating, you're like, I want to go to the gym. You might go for a week, but then you stop. You need to work on your identity first. Like that's where the real change is going to happen.
I love how you mentioned identity and almost like self-worth, because that was a recent thing you talked about on your social media page. And, it's been a recent topic of yours. So I love that you kind of went into that. So I'd love to get into like, what does that kind of process, look like? I know you kind of started it off, but how would you kind of overcome those hurdles of like that negative self-talk that someone's have, where they're watching the Netflix or they're skipping the workouts? Like, how do you kind of help get their identity on the positive track?
Yeah. So first up, I think it's like really understanding, what is your motivator? Like, are you motivated by pain or pleasure? Because everyone is going to be motivated by one or the other. So for me, for instance, I'm motivated by pain. If I am like in a place where I'm like, okay, I'm not happy, something needs to change, and I get to that bottom point, like I will start making a difference. And I think, for instance, that's what happened when I was going through my eating disorder. I was at a point where I was like, I can't live like this anymore. Like something's got to change. Otherwise, I'm going down a dark path, you know, although I already was, but it was going to get darker. So that was like the turning point. And like when I got to the point, I'm like all in on it. Or some people are like, you know what, how good it will be, my life will be like when I get there. That's like could be the other motivator, right? So understanding how you're motivated, bringing awareness to what are your patterns when it comes to sabotaging yourself. Like what is it, what starts that like set off of being like, okay, I'm gonna skip the gym, I'm gonna eat the takeout, I'm gonna sit on the couch. Like what is that pattern? How can you catch yourself? But really getting clear, like sitting down first and knowing like you have to choose that, yes, I do want to make the change. And then working on the identity is like who basically it's going to be like, what's the opposite of what I'm doing now, right? When you have a limiting belief, it's like, what's the empowering belief? So really working on that identity portion, and like you can just like write that out, like who's that version of me, what habits do they have? And it, again, it takes time, right? It's not an overnight thing. This could be like, you know, over 6 months, for instance, like really, because it takes time to adopt these new habits and behaviors. But then over time that becomes part of your personality, right? Like you can change your personality. So it's really not taking away from who you are, it's adding to who you are. And so that's definitely where I would start. And then understanding, yeah, like I said, how you're operating and how you can start catching those habits and instilling those positive new ones as well. And also self-talk, like getting familiar with the voice in your head and looking at it from a like outside view, not like looking at it from, you know, with curiosity, like as if it's someone else talking to you, be like, this is interesting. What are they saying to me now? You know, like this is what the self-talk loop is, and writing it down so you can see the pattern of all the negative self-talk, like even like throughout the day, and then deciding to change that loop and like talking to yourself in an empowering way, not in a disempowering. Because there's, I think it's Dr. Osho. I always forget his name. He's like this Japanese scientist or doctor, and I'll send you the links for it on YouTube after. But he has like these studies on water molecules that have changed through like the power of words and that. And also there's like the rice, there's like 3 rice jars, and one is like people are speaking like loving words to it, like you're amazing, I love you, all these things. One is sworn at negative words, and one is just completely left alone. And the one that's completely left alone and neglected starts to grow mold. And I think the other one is something similar like that. It grows mold as well. But the one that's like positive words are being said to, like it starts sprouting, and they're all left like started off the same. And there's also studies as well that show like plants, for instance, they've had like a room full of plants and they'll play classical like light music, like frequency has so much power. And the plants were like thriving, and then they did another one where like they're playing like screamo music, like heavy metal, and the plants were starting to like die. So it's insane, like the power of sound. Yeah, I'll send you the links to look it up. It's crazy, but sound and frequency carry such a vibration, right? And vibration is something when it comes to manifestation that we are all vibrating all the time. You know, we're all made up of the same like matter in that sense. We're all energy, so it makes sense that would happen. So when you think about words carry energy, so if you're saying negative things to yourself, that's going to go in. It's the same as, you know, if you're saying you struggled with not feeling good enough from your dad, that's the power of words, right? So, but if your dad had said, praised you and said, you're more than enough, you're so good, like that would have been what you believed as well, right?
Oh, for sure. Very true. It's great that you said too of like, you know, the words or your energy. And it's almost like that is like the destiny that you become, because if you have one person that tells himself for a week of, I'm a piece of shit, I'm a terrible person, or, you know, I'm not worthy of success, like that's what's truly going to happen in comparison to the person that's saying to themselves, like, I'm going to exercise or I'm going to have positive self-talk. Like it is actually kind of like shocking in a way when you start to do it and it starts to come, you know, to reality, like how powerful like some of these sound. Because to some people they sound maybe a little like cheesy or like, no, that can't be true, until you start doing it. Then you're like, oh shit, like that's actually working.
Totally. And like you have, like that's the thing, right? You have to want to change, because if you don't want it, then it's going to be really difficult to do it. But you need to like want to change and be open-minded to it, because I think there is a lot of resistance, and like I've definitely had this in the past before as well, but like to be honest, some of these like techniques are so basic and simple, like breathing. It's so simple. EFT tapping, you're literally tapping on your body and saying affirmations, and it completely rewires your mindset. It works with your body, it's working with your energy, and it creates such an incredible impact, right? So it's like these small changes over time can have such an impact, but I think sometimes people are like skeptical and they're like, that can't be true, that's too easy, or like that's too woo woo or something. But it's actually like these are practices that have been used for like thousands of years, and they work.
Yeah. And you did mention it a couple minutes ago about the motivation being pain or pleasure. Like, honestly, like how would somebody know what their motivation is?
I think just getting curious and like what does motivate you, like when you do make it, like looking back and like kind of bring self-awareness, like when you've made a change or like a big change in your life, what was the driving point that caused that change? Was it because you like hit a rock bottom and you're like, I can't be doing this anymore? Or was it just the thought of like, you know what? I would like that just feels amazing. Like thinking about that lifestyle or whatever that goal would be. Like thinking about going to the gym and like working out to have the best body, that just feels amazing. I'm going to do that versus being like, I can't feel like I can't stand looking in the mirror anymore kind of vibe, like it's sort of, so that's what I mean. Like, what's the pain of where you are, or like a relationship as well. You can use that example. Like, is the relationship so painful and like you just can't be in it anymore that you just end up leaving, where maybe before you're like, well, it's okay, maybe they'll change, like that kind of thing, where it's like, you need that like kind of, you just can't take it anymore. So that's like really pain driven, where pleasure is like you just know how good it's going to feel.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like myself at the gym because it's like it feels like both, right? Where it's like it's hard work of whether you're doing cardio or you're lifting weights or we're raising your heart rate into zone 2 or above is kind of painful in some degrees, but afterwards you're kind of like, all right, that felt great, like I feel good. Maybe that's where the pleasure is, so maybe it's both.
It can be both. Yeah. I kind of mean that like driving initial factor. Like, I think as you're kind of going, like continuously on for that example, that's going to be really much like the motivation and kind of discipline and consistency behind it. But I mean like that kind of initial like change when you're really like, okay, I'm ready to make a change in my life.
Yeah, we've been talking about personal development for a while, and you did have a podcast where you did talk about the dark and deep sides of personal development. So, what were those deep and dark thoughts that you had within personal development?
I mean, there's definitely like, you know, the bright and the dark side of everything, but yeah, personal development I think is like one of the most incredible things people can do for themselves, and I think everyone should do it. But at the same time, there is that point with getting carried away with it. So I know, for instance, like that definitely happened with me. I'm kind of like, once I get all in on something, I'm sort of become obsessed with it. And I do have to catch myself sometimes because I love personal development. I love like going through different like workshops and all these kind of things. But we can get to a point where we're like, we feel like we need to fix everything about ourselves, where no one's ever broken. There's just things that we can improve on ourselves, right? But there is like, I think when you are going through a lot, when you're like really getting curious about your past and uncovering a lot, we're looking at parts of ourselves that we haven't looked at before. It can be heavy, it's hard, and a lot of people don't want to look at it, so they blank it out. They might drink instead, or shop or gamble, whatever that might be, not look at those parts of themselves, because it's uncomfortable. But to get to where we want to be, we need to go through that discomfort, right? To really step into our highest selves. So that is part where the dark side is, because it is really looking at it. Like, I went through, when I was going through like really in the depths of my own personal healing journey, like I had a full year of working through a lot of stuff that I hadn't looked at before. And yeah, there was a lot of dark, like some people call it like the dark night of the soul. You're really kind of like questioning things. It's like your whole reality is sort of shifting. You can tie in line with like spiritual awakening, dark night of the soul kind of a vibe. So there's that, but then it does get better and it does become much easier and you become happier again. So you do have to kind of go through that to get to the other side. But then there's also, like I said, that continuous basis where you're sort of like become obsessed with trying to constantly fix yourself, or thinking like you can just get so buried deep in the healing that you kind of forget to still live and enjoy life.
Yeah. And we can also cut this if you don't want to share it. It's totally up to you. But can you share some of those maybe darker thoughts that you kind of went through before you saw the light?
Yeah, totally. I'm totally open to talking about that because I think it's a really important topic, and one that a lot of people go through. So, for me personally, I've been on like quite a personal development journey for a number of years. It kind of went up and down and up and down, but I would say one of the biggest ones I've had was definitely, going almost 2 years ago now, or just over. I decided to give up alcohol. And because that was something that I'd struggled with, suppressing emotions and things. I didn't have the best relationship with alcohol. And I just reached a point I was like, I can't have this in my life anymore. Like, I don't want it. And when I stopped drinking, I was sort of dabbling in the sober curious to start. But when I stopped drinking, you sort of don't realize that like all these things that you had been like suppressing through alcohol start to resurface. And I was like, ooh, okay, there's definitely some things to look at here. And I didn't know it was going to be like, I was like, I'm just going to stop drinking. I'm going to be healthy and happy. And then boy, was I in for a ride. But yeah, so things started to resurface. So I really went in and I started doing a lot of personal development work and a lot of inner shadow work and self hypnosis, all these things. And yeah, it was heavy. Like I had a lot of things to look at. So I spent a lot of time alone that specific year. But the growth I had from that was like incredible. And I really, became like a different person from that whole experience. So I'm so glad I did it. But yeah, it was definitely a pretty questionably dark time in the sense where I just felt like I was like, what is happening? Like, I felt like I was like questioning all these things that I knew. I felt like I was definitely going through, like I said, a spiritual awakening, just connecting with a lot of other sides of myself, other things spiritually as well. And yeah, it was really a pretty crazy, wild time.
What was kind of resurfacing for you, and what were you questioning?
A lot was resurfacing around like childhood, the way I was brought up, things that had happened to me, and like feeling, I guess, a bit of anger around them. Like I went through, but it was almost like a grieving process. I felt like I was grieving my old self because I felt like everything I had sort of knew and blocked out was kind of like old memories were resurfacing that like I had completely forgotten. I won't go into too much detail about those. That is a bit personal, but that like old things that had happened from childhood that I thought I had like weren't going to affect me, like were really there, and I had to like mourn that. It almost felt like a death in a way. Like it is. It's like an ego death. You can call it that. You have to like mourn that side of you. And I went through like, feeling anger and guilt and blaming, certain people in my life that had caused that. But then you go through that process, but then I had to see like, no, it's my responsibility to work through that. So that's where the forgiveness came in and all those other things. So, when you can actually go through that process, you become so much lighter on the other side. So yeah, that was kind of like a huge portion of it as well, but just really looking at all those aspects and understanding. And I guess from like more of like the spiritual side, like I've always been really into spirituality, I've been a very spiritual person, but it just became like more and more open and like really understanding like the bigger picture in a sense, and like just getting more clarity around like consciousness and how things are operating.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that's a very fair point, and I think what you mentioned on going through those darker moments and having to like realize that like what you're feeling is like okay, and then like how do you almost like it seems like acceptance is very good, and then also forgiveness that you mentioned in the very beginning is super critical for allowing yourself to kind of go through the whirlwind of emotions and thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, sorry, what, can you just repeat that question?
I didn't have a question.
Oh, okay. I thought you were asking a
I was
question.
just responding.
Okay.
Nope. So I would love to kind of now transition into more of your entrepreneurial journey. So you did talk about your story on having a toxic events job, and you also worked part-time at a grocery store, I believe, that you mentioned, while you built your business. So what was that kind of entrepreneurship process like while also trying to work part-time?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to work for myself in some way, shape, or form. I really struggled for years about how to make it happen, didn't believing it was possible for me, all the limiting beliefs that a lot of people face in that sense. So I never really gave it a full solid shot. And it was, yeah, I moved to the UK in 2019. And I had just started working in the events there in a finance company. And it was, yeah, a very toxic environment. Um, and I was really miserable there. Like I was having panic attacks going into work. It was long hours. Like it was commuting like an hour each way on the train. working, not getting home till like 10 o'clock at night, and just hustling, like really just hustling. And yeah, it was a lot, and I was just really unhappy. And then it was right before COVID actually happened, and like we went into lockdown. I was actually let go, like completely blindsidedly let go from the manager I was working with. But although it was scary, I was so relieved because I was like, I was looking for another job anyways, and I thought I was going to find one. I had interviews set up, but COVID, one of the first things that went was the events industry. So every interview I had lined up completely dried up, and I was unemployed. So I was really freaking out. I felt like all my safety kind of was gone, but I was so determined not, because I had just gotten to the UK and I'd spent all year prior to that, like saving up for the visa, saving up to move abroad. I was so excited. So I was like, I've been here like just a few months. I'm not going home. So I thought, well, what's the safest bet to get right now? Because there was really no jobs at the moment. And because of the visa that I was on in the UK, I didn't qualify for like the furlough or any government support. So I was completely on my own in that sense. So yeah, I went and got a job at a local grocery store working in the bakery, part-time. And yeah, it definitely was not what I wanted to be doing at the time for sure. But it was like, it was paying the bills in that sense. And, I had a lot more time, and as much as I didn't love that job, I was so happy to not be in that events industry anymore. Not fully in events. Like I still love events planning. Don't get me wrong. I just mean like in that job itself, how toxic it was. And I just felt so like I had space to think. I had space to like slow down. And, I thought, this is my chance. Like, this is the time to do it because I have the free time. And I'd heard I was listening to a podcast around, at the time I wanted to like own a van and drive around and work remotely and just like live the van life. And this woman who was doing that was talking about how she was doing digital marketing online, and she had done it through this course. And I was like, no way. Okay. So I messaged her, and she was saying how amazing the course was. So yeah, I just decided to, even though I definitely did not have the money at the time, I thought, I'm taking a chance on myself. I invested in the course and I went all in on it. And yeah, I ended up starting a virtual assistant business, which did pretty okay in the beginning. Like I went full time within 6 months, quit the bakery. And yeah, I ended up leaving and doing my dream, which was always to digital nomad travel. And I moved to Spain for a few months during 2021. And that was sort of like the starting of my entrepreneurship journey. I pivoted a few times. Like I went into, I was doing virtual assistant to start. I was working with like spiritual coaches and business owners and helping them with events planning as well and retreats. And then through that, I just was like, I always wanted to get into coaching, and I didn't have the confidence back then, to be honest, because there's a lot with coaching. You're very seen. You're very sharing your story. You're showing up a lot. And you don't realize when you get into coaching, you go through your own major personal development journey as well. So yeah, that's kind of where it started from. And I'm so happy that I did make the transition into coaching because it just feels so much more aligned.
I have so many follow-up questions from this, so I'm going to try to. So you were living in Canada at the time, and then you moved to the UK?
I was living in Canada like before moving to the UK. This all happened in the UK.
Why did you want to move to the UK from Canada?
Because I love to travel. I honestly never felt at home in Canada. I don't know why. It's a beautiful, amazing country, but I just never like really resonated with living there. I'd always wanted to kind of leave, and even during like college, I was sort of always moving around to different parts of Canada. And yeah, UK is amazing to travel Europe, and I was able to get a 5-year visa to come over here. So it felt like a no-brainer.
Did you have any thoughts of moving to the United States?
When I was younger, yeah, but the US doesn't really make it very easy for people to move there. It's quite difficult to get a visa.
Oh, really? I actually have no idea. So I don't even know what the process is like to get a visa or be a citizen.
It's really hard for for Canadians or anyone really. I think unless you're like specialized in a certain career or married to, even I've known people who even like got married to a US citizen from another country and they were still having trouble getting a visa to come in.
Oh, wow. So you picked like, is there any other, like, let's say you're living in Canada or the United States and you're like, okay, I want to go to another country. Like, is the UK visa process like something that other people can easily do?
I mean, it depends. A lot of countries have working holiday visas, which I use. I spent time in Australia and New Zealand as well, and that's the visa I used there. But there's age limits on them. I think up to like 35 for some countries. UK, for me, it was easy because I have a grandparent who's from the UK. So it's called an ancestry visa. And through that process, I was able to get a 5-year visa, which leads to permanent residency, actually. So that's been like such an amazing thing to have.
Gotcha. Okay. And then you did mention that you had a virtual assistant business. How did you find, or sorry, where did you find the clients that you did the work for? Like, were you on like a Fiverr or something like that, or social media?
Yeah, I did a lot through Instagram, and yeah, I think places like it was like People Per Hour is a site I was using, and then yeah, Upwork I think was another one, and then just Facebook groups, to be honest, like looking through different Facebook groups or word of mouth.
Gotcha. No, I was curious because like I think there's probably a lot of those, and I think as the when COVID hit and then more remote work, I think a lot more people maybe started to use them, and so there's so many different spots. Like Facebook groups is like a really maybe under utilized way to find so many different like opportunities for people.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh, Facebook groups were amazing. Like there was even one like, for instance, like spiritual virtual assistants and like virtual assistants for, I don't know, like tech startups. Like there's basically for, because it just was like with anything, it's important to kind of niche into something. So yeah, the more skills you have in a certain area, the better it is, and also the more you can charge as well.
So I have to ask, what is your favorite baked good or item?
My favorite baked good or item. Ooh, that's an interesting one. I'm not really much of a baked goods person, to be honest, but I guess I would say like I love like a vegan gluten-free brownie. I'm not vegan, I just love vegan gluten-free brownies.
That's fair. There's like a trend going on that I've seen on like I don't know if it's TikTok or Instagram, but they take a croissant and they put like cookie dough in the middle and bake a cookie on top of it. I try to limit myself to those because those are dangerous, but those are delicious.
Oh my gosh, wow. That sounds, yeah, really good. I had I was at a friend's birthday last night and it was called Moldova pudding, I think. It's a South African cake and that was absolutely amazing. So, yeah, I would probably say that's up there.
Oh, that's a good one. So you did mention how you started your business and you started traveling like internationally, as that was like a huge goal for you. And you did mention how you lived in Australia, New Zealand, and you also lived in Bali. What was that experience like? Was it just like you living alone? Did you live with other people? I know that this topic of like living in these other countries is like becoming so common now.
Yeah, definitely. So when I went to Australia, I honestly just went with like no plans, kind of. I had quit my job in Toronto. Um, and I was just like, I wanted to be a backpacker and it was so fun. But yeah, I ended up living in a hostel for a while. I was like really going in the backpacker vibes. Yeah, I lived in a hostel for a bit. And then I also moved into a house with a few friends, which was so much fun. Loved that experience. And then, yeah, same in New Zealand. We were two couples that had gone over at the time, and we just moved in together. And then, but there's so many different ways you can do it. You can live alone, but I think like I don't know, it just depends, right? If you're going for the experience, like and you want to meet people, I think it's great to like I did that even in London. I moved into a house share to start with, just to meet people, and then later on I ended up moving into my own place. But it was just because I find if you're going to a new country, you don't know anyone, to be on your own completely unless you really love that. I kind of wanted to, I was a bit more social. So it's just finding what works well for you.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds very scary, like moving to a completely new country where you don't know anybody. You probably maybe struggle to get around and like find certain things, figure out all the different buzzwords. So it's definitely got to be a challenge. So having a couple people that are a little more local to that area sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, or just, well, actually, most of the people I met weren't even locals. They were kind of just people traveling. So you make such instant friends with people when you're traveling. And I think you're all in the same scenario, right? You're both like open, like you meet people who are traveling and doing those kind of experiences, usually they're very open-minded. They're looking for adventure. So you have kind of similar mindsets for the most part.
Yeah, which out of all the countries that you've been to, which countries would you like recommend people go to visit? Like I've never been to Spain, Australia, New Zealand, Bali. I don't know all the other countries you've been to. I've been to the United Kingdom. So like what would be like your top 3 to 5 countries that you would like recommend some of your friends to go visit?
Bali's definitely amazing. I only spent a week there before, but I'm actually going to I leave on Sunday to spend 2 months there. So I'm super excited for that. And yeah, Australia, I would say Australia. I loved Australia. Definitely was an amazing place to visit. And Spain. Those are probably my two favorites. Spain and Australia are two of my favorite places. And also Portugal. Portugal is an amazing country to visit.
I've heard Spain and Portugal are also very beautiful, and I've heard Bali is also like insanely beautiful and affordable to travel to once you're there. But flying there can be hard.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Bali's got like, I feel like it's got everything. And for digital nomads or people who are working remotely, which is something like I absolutely love doing, and I love being around like-minded people like that who are also entrepreneurs, looking to create incredible impact and living healthy lifestyles, like growth mindset. Like you got a lot of that in Bali.
Okay, so if I were to like go to Bali, like how would I like I'm an introvert by nature, so like I would probably want to live alone. Like how would you like meet friends? Like did you use like Facebook groups, or like is there a certain website you can use to kind of like meet these like-minded people?
Yeah, I think there's always like meetups is a good place to look, Facebook groups. A lot of places too have like WhatsApp meetup groups or like Telegram. I think people also use chat groups for things like that. And then also, I mean, being alone, like I'll be living alone as well when I go there, but I'm going to be going to like cafes and co-working places and joining events and meetups. And yeah, I think like so many people go to places like Bali, so it's pretty easy to meet people.
Gotcha. Which country, if you were to only pick one country to go back to live in full time and you only could pick one, which one would you pick?
Oh, that's easy, Spain.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one thing that you've recently hosted as part of the work that you do is a woman's retreat. Can you kind of talk about what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, definitely. I loved it. It was my first in person. I've done online retreats, but that was my first like in person one hosting, and it was such an incredible experience. There's nothing quite like bringing in person experiences are so impactful, and there's a lot of change that can happen when you bring, and this is the same for men as well, but I can speak on the women aspect of it. But when you bring women into a room together and like I said, men as well, but you can be in this place where it's non-judgmental space. You can open up, share about what, like we all struggle with so many similar things. And I think we tend to think we struggle alone. But when you're in the space of healing and wellness and letting go and, empowerment and being around other like-minded people, it's so powerful like none other. Like you can have such incredible shifts. So yeah, it was such a beautiful, amazing day. We had like yoga. We had it was doing a manifestation workshop. We had a kind of a tantra type session. We had something called inner dance, which is using sound frequencies to have like a sound journey internally. And we just had like cacao, which is like a heart opening. Cacao is really meant, to open up your heart and open space for gratitude and meditation. It was just, incredible day.
How would you describe the women that how did they feel when they arrived to your retreat, like beforehand? And then how would you have described them when they left?
So I think sometimes, especially if someone's new coming to a retreat, which we definitely had a few people there that were new, it can feel intimidating, right? If you're coming alone, sometimes you don't know what to expect, especially if like like I said, those type of experiences are new. But yeah, sometimes people show up and they're really. I always believe that the right people who need that kind of work end up coming. And I don't really believe in coincidences. I think things like happen as they're meant to. And so I think the right people needing those kind of experiences show up. So, the women who did need that kind of healing or did need that kind of release were there. And yeah, in the beginning, sometimes it can feel a bit like closed off, not sure what to expect, afraid to open up a little bit, but that's why you sort of ease into the day. So we always start with like an opening. What are you sharing? What are your intentions? What do you want to let go of? What do you want to walk away with today? So when you also set the intention, just like with anything, if you set that intention to go in with that, you're a lot more likely to have that experience. So I think it's important to keep an open mind, keep an open heart, and also very important, like do what feels comfortable for you, right? Sometimes these workshops can be a little bit stretchy for people. So it's great to get out of your comfort zone. But if you're feeling very uncomfortable, like that's a space, like talk to someone who's there, right? And like make that known. But yeah, definitely when they came, like I think, they were like looking forward to the event, excited for what's gonna happen. And when they left, it was just amazing. Like there was tears, there was happiness, like people just felt alive again. Because the whole point of the retreat was called the Reawaken Retreat. It was all around like, if you've been to Scotland before, winter is very long here. It's kind of cold. It can be very dreary. And so with spring's welcoming in, we're just like letting go of the heaviness, like stepping back into our like feminine energy. So that was really the basis of the retreat. And yeah, we definitely achieved that.
That's very beautifully put. And I'm glad that you're able to kind of bring that energy to your retreat. So, like, how did you feel? You said this was like what your first in person retreat. Like, how did you feel kind of going in there? Like, what did you do to prepare yourself and set your mind to be right?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a few, like I've done in-person events before. I've done a few workshops before. Events planning is my corporate background. So putting the event on itself, I wasn't really nervous about, but I think kind of because my background, like I said, was events planning. So I was more behind the scenes. So kind of showing up and hosting the space and bringing this experience. I was really excited. I wouldn't say I was nervous. I was really excited for it, but yeah, I always have a bit of a ritual that I do before I do any in-person event. And I just like I'll do like my morning routine, and I'll just put on some like high vibe music and really get into it and get into the energy that I want to bring forward. So I'm like, how do I want people to feel? How do I want to feel for the day? And really get into that space as well. Because if you can get too much in your head worrying about every little detail, how it's going to go, it's going to be stressful. The thing with retreats compared to events is like retreats are meant to flow more, like leaving space for things to happen. Like it's great to have a schedule, but like because you're working with like depending what the retreat is, but in these kind of instances you're working with a little bit more emotions, like going deep in certain areas. So things might take a bit longer. You need more spaciousness. So it's just going with the flow, having fun, knowing that everyone's there for the same reason. It's not like sometimes with certain events in the corporate world, it's like, we have to stick to the schedule. We have to get this done by this time. It's very like this way, regimented. But with retreats, yes, it's still regimented in a sense, but it's more like, it's a lot more open, and leaving that space for the people who need it.
So, how did you kind of help these women kind of have these breakthroughs and like almost like see the light on like that deeper level? Like, how did either you assist with it or other people or the time? Because you mentioned that it takes like time to kind of open up and kind of get these kind of thoughts and feelings flowing.
Yeah, I mean, well, we had there was five different facilitators at the retreat, so everyone was doing their own session as well. But for instance, like my own session, like we just designed it the way when we're opening up the space. Like I said, we keep it so it's like we don't go right into one of the deeper healing workshops right away necessarily. We'll kind of save that for like a little bit later on, so that way it gives time for people to open up, to talk, and it's very much a sharing circle. So like for instance, women's circles, there's a lot of space to like share what's on your mind, share why you're there, but also you don't have to. It's very much like what feels good for you. But the invitation is always, yeah, share what you need to. But when you see other people speaking what's on their mind, you sort of see, like I always believe people see themselves in every person, right? So when someone's sharing their stories and you're resonating to part of it because you see yourself in that. So when you feel that safety, you can connect. There's more safety to open up, and then that's where that deep healing and transformation can happen. Because if you're too closed off, you're not going to be open to allowing that shift to happen. But when you can create that safety and that space to open in a judgment-free zone, then that's where a lot of the magic can happen.
I like how you said that, because that's really what, like, part of what I'm trying to do is like I'm trying to open up myself so that I can also help other people open up. But then I also want people like listening to also see these like different tidbits here and like reflect on their own life so that they can also open up.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so good. Like, I think that is so true, because the more, like, with any kind of work that you're doing in your own life, right, you're going to be the example and an invitation, because people are like, oh, he's changed. Oh my God, there's something about him. He seems so much more like at ease or happy, content, different. And it's like when you're rising above from where you were, like, you're being the example for other people as well. And it's like, what's going on there? And it's like inspiring, right, for other people to do it too.
Yes. Yeah. So how did you like maybe help these women find what you call their unique soul path?
Yeah. So I go through a process, just like really reevaluating their life, where they're at, what do they really desire? Because I think a lot of people um, just deny what they actually want because of what society has told us, because of what our families or culture, like, you know, generational, what we've been programmed to believe the right path is to do. So this is why so many people feel so out of alignment, right? Or like have all these, like feel so like they're just going through the motions of life. They feel depressed. They feel like there's got to be something more, because you're not living in alignment with what you really want, like on a deep soul level is what I like to call it. But when you can get clear on what that is and connect with that authentic part of yourself and uncover what does that look like for you, you can start creating your life around that. So it's really about taking them through a process of like pulling back all those layers, beyond all that program, like what do you want? What does that look like for you? And then taking them through a process to connect with that.
How do you help them peel back the layers to like kind of open up to you?
Oh, there's so many different ways to go into it. But yeah, just through like different modalities and tools and like worksheets and questioning, a lot of questioning. Basically, it's all like questioning is the key. When it comes to coaching, it's really about asking a lot of questions, getting to the depth of it, right? Because a lot of times the individual, for instance, like a coach is meant to see the client at their highest potential, right? At their highest selves, where the client can't always see themselves that way. So when we're asking questions to get curious about that and take them deeper and deeper and deeper, like everyone has the answers already within them, but they can be very closed off, and like we don't have access to them sometimes because there's so many different stories going on in our head or things we should be doing, right? But it's like taking away that should. It's like, what do you want to do? What do you get to do, right? And also allowing them to see that they can give themselves permission to do that. Because I think a lot of people do struggle with the fact that like they don't allow themselves to do what it is they want to do.
Yeah. And the permission thing I think is big because people really those limiting beliefs don't allow for that permission to go through and allow that. So I think that's very true.
Yeah, definitely. Like I sort of have a process where I call it like inner radiance, and it's really about creating that internal radiance on the inside. So like creating your world on the inside so amazing that it overflows into your external reality. Because whatever is going on internally is going to be an external reflection in your world, right? So we focus on like aligning your energy. So that's going to look like, maybe slowing down, creating a morning routine, creating a wellness plan, looking at where are you spending your energy? Is it around, toxic places, toxic people? How can you clean that up? And then also doing like embodiment and identity work and manifestation practices. So I have like this whole sort of process that I take clients through that encompasses all like around clarity, energetics, embodiment, manifestation, mindset, to really in action as well, to really help them kind of step into their fullest purpose and their highest selves.
That's very beautifully put on how you help people. I'd love to. You said you use like questioning as a way to help these people like open up. Can you give like some examples?
Of questions that you'd ask?
Yeah.
Well, it would just be kind of diving in. Like we'd have to kind of go into what that would be at first, but it would just really be asking like thought-provoking questions about like if someone, for instance, like everyone has their own perception of reality, right? Or perception of what's going on, but often it's like it's their perception of it. So it's really like, is that actually true? Like, did that happen? Did so and so come off in that way? Okay, well, how else could have it unfolded? And it's just like asking those questions like, is that something you really want? Is that something you really believe? Who said that? Why is it that way? Do you know what I mean? So it's like really kind of getting around that. It's a bit difficult for me to say unless we're like going through an actual example, but it's like, because those questions, a lot of the time it's like intuitive, you have to listen very well. That's like a skill coaches need to have, is being a good listener. And then from that process, you kind of go with the flow of like, okay, well, we're going down this path. We're going down that pathway now.
So I'd love to get into kind of the signature question, which will be the question I ask every guest on the podcast. And it goes into the topic of happiness and your life's purpose. And so they say that your life's purpose is the thing that you didn't receive as a child. So, and I've also, constantly gone to so many friends and family members or different people and said like, what is happiness, or how do you find out like what is your purpose? And I think so many people are always asking themselves that question. So I wanted to know what your thoughts and opinions are on, somebody's, when they ask you that, like what is happiness, and then what is, your life's purpose, and how do you identify that?
So you're saying that they say whatever you didn't have as a kid is your purpose?
Yeah, that's what I've heard actually. And it's kind of interesting because I can, sometimes see that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I can maybe see how that would come up. Happiness. I think happiness is really living authentically to what feels good for you. outside of other people's expectations, outside of what you feel like you should be doing. I think that's pure happiness, is like living in alignment with what you really desire, waking up every day, excited for the day ahead, full of gratitude, feeling good. Like that to me is like abundance and wealth. Like if you feel good, it like on a whole like holistic level, like physically, mentally, emotionally in your body, and you are so lit up with the life you're living and you have good friends and love around you, that is more important than any kind of money out there beyond that, you know. But I think when you are living in that place, that just becomes a natural byproduct of you, because you can go into magnetism, manifestation in that sense. But yeah, to me, that's like happiness, is just living with what feels really good for you and not living to other people's expectations.
Yes. No, I love how you said it in like all these different aspects and like all these, key different areas. I really love how you put it that way.
Yeah, thanks. And purpose. Yeah, I think I do feel like I'm living my purpose. Absolutely. Like I feel like this work is definitely like what I'm meant to be doing 100%.
How would you like, if someone doesn't know what like their purpose is, like how would you kind of help them feel the same things that you're feeling like today?
Again, just getting curious, like asking yourself, like understanding, what do you like what do you spend a lot of time doing, what asking friends and family, like what would they say about you, how would they talk about you, or and just really looking at like what did you spend a lot of time as a kid looking at or doing, what were you loving to do, looking at your talents. Like your purpose doesn't always need to be your work, it's your purpose can be other things as well. There's a great movie, is it Soul? I think the Disney Pixar one. I think it's Pixar, but it's called Soul. I highly recommend everyone watch it. It's such a beautiful movie, dictating like, because in it the guy's like talking about how music is his purpose, but he's finding like it shows that there's purpose in other places of life as well. So it's just finding like maybe your purpose is just like volunteering in a community and helping other people, like connecting with other people. It could be so many things. But I think it's just really connecting with, like, again, what feels really good for you, what you love. Like that's the thing, follow your joy basically would be my advice to anyone. Like what lights you up, follow that. And it will be, that's like, follow those breadcrumbs.
Yeah, that's so true too, is because like some people maybe don't even realize that like those small little things that they might do give them like so much more joy than they truly realize. And so following those breadcrumbs, like you mentioned, is really the path to follow, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. Like for me, I know like I love, like traveling is like a huge love of mine. That's like a big core value. And for me, like I used to not think I was able to travel because I thought I had to work in a job, like corporate job, and never be able. And like in Canada, I think it's probably the same in the US. We used to only get like 10 days of holiday per year, where in the Europe it's a lot more. So like I was subscribing to that, and I was like, what? No way. Like, I don't want that to be my life. Like, I want to be able to travel whenever I can. And yeah, I mean, it's a bit different when you're an entrepreneur, because like you're still working while you're abroad, but it's like having that freedom to do both. Like, that was more important to me than like having my 10 days per year.
Sounds like you're going to enter into being a travel agent maybe sometime in the future, or doing some sort of traveling, booking for
No, but maybe
people.
retreats abroad. That's on the horizon for sure.
Oh, there you go. That
Yeah.
would be nice.
Definitely.
All right, Lori. Well, that wraps up the episode for today. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story and journey. Where can listeners go to find more about you?
Yeah, definitely. So you can find me on Instagram at lorina.christine. I'll give you the link to drop in the show notes if you want. And also, yeah, my podcast as well at Unleash Your Radiance. Those are like the two best places to find me as well. And I'll leave your listeners also, I have a free abundance affirmations track that I created for listeners if they're really looking to call in more abundance, more wealth into their life as well. It's an incredible affirmations track. So I'll drop the link there for if anyone wants to download that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Listeners, if there's any questions or comments you have, please feel free to email or DM me on socials, which will be also in the show notes. As always, please don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I very much appreciate it. Thank you, Lori, for joining me here today.
Thank you so much.